Hi, welcome back to Vondelpete, and in today's video we're going to be looking over my Big 5 results. I'm sure you're all aware of the Big 5 aspect scale, and I want to see if there's any link between my Big 5 results and me being an INFP in the Myers-Briggs system, which is obviously a very different kind of personality type system, but it might be interesting to see if you've done the Big 5 test and if you've got very similar or different results to me. So to start with, we've got agreeableness. And I'm typical or average when it comes to being agreeable, which makes sense to me because I've never thought that I'm too agreeable. But when you scroll down, it actually says for compassion, I'm moderately low in compassion. I'm only 31st percentile compassionate, which is an interesting comparison to politeness, where I'm moderately high. So basically, I guess what that's saying is that I've got a cold heart, but I avoid confrontation and I try to be polite. Which does make sense. Doesn't really paint me as a very nice person, does it? It shows me to be someone who's just being polite and non-confrontational, but when it really comes down to it, maybe my heart's not bleeding as much as I'm trying to make out. I would say in my defense that I don't think I'm that lacking in compassion overall, but maybe it's more the definition. I've got a feeling that other people who are INFPs score a little bit better on that. So next we've got conscientiousness, where I'm extremely low at 13. Which is kind of funny because I think in workplaces I'm seen as, I guess it depends who I'm working with, but I sometimes had a reputation of being very conscientious. But when I delve deeper, it says industriousness low at 14. Again, extremely low industriousness. I mean, I'm someone who always gets everything done at the last minute, but always on time. But again, I think this kind of proves their point a bit, where I'm not very industrious, but I can probably give the impression of being industrious through other means. But it also says here that I'm very low in terms of orderliness. So it says that I'm only 20 when it comes to that. And it means that people low in orderliness, they don't get disturbed or upset or disgusted by mess, disorder, or chaos. And I think this sort of makes sense with me. I'm a bit of a clean freak, so I don't know how that matches into things, but there are a lot of things that I don't notice, and I don't get like really upset by things being out of their correct place. I get a little bit upset, but not really. You know, it's kind of strange. It's a bit like the last results where, you know, I keep my apartment clean and I keep things basically in their right spots to some degree, but it's all kind of just to tell myself. It's almost like a lie that I'm telling myself that I'm orderly, but when it really comes down to it, I'm not actually programmed that way, and that makes a lot of sense as well. But anyway, no real surprises here. It just doesn't really make me look like a very good person. And yeah, it says here that, you know, people who are low in orderliness are less likely to be politically conservative, which I guess I'm not. And I'm definitely someone who can upset people who are very orderly. But once again, it's quite hard to work out how accurate this is, given I behave in an orderly way. You know, I'm always kind of like on the ball when it comes to like doing chores, and I enjoy doing chores as well. So how could I be this low in orderliness? But maybe I'm working against my own nature, or maybe this is just not an accurate representation of who I am. I don't know. Then we've got extroversion, which says I'm moderately low, which I would agree with. It says that I'm 28th percentile extroverted, which is interesting because you get a lot of people who think that I'm extroverted. Maybe not a lot. I mean, I asked a guy who I was studying with last year, an INTP, and I said, do you think I'm extroverted? Because a lot of people say that I'm extroverted, and he goes, what? You? No. But I don't know, maybe I've changed my behavior a little bit over the years. I think I used to put on a bit of an extroverted mask because I decided it makes life a little bit easier for me. I used to be very nervous about being too introverted, and I felt like it made me come across as weak. So I put on a bit of an extroverted mask, which, you know, was assisted through a lot of alcohol. And I think only maybe about 6 years ago, I started dropping the extroverted mask, just so that I wouldn't have a nervous breakdown, I suppose. Now, when you scroll down, it says for enthusiasm, I'm typical or average at 47th percentile. I actually thought I might be lower than that. I guess it depends on who you're hanging out with. But maybe it's true, like I'm enthusiastic when it comes to creating things. I can get very animated about different topics and I can't stop talking about this or that. So maybe that shows that I'm, you know, somewhat of an enthusiastic person, even if I slightly lean towards a lack of enthusiasm. I'm definitely the sort of person who, like, you know, what was it when I was 10 or 11? I was in the Cook Islands in a resort with my ENTP mum, who was a very enthusiastic person. And I remember she got me to go in front of everyone at this, like, Cook Island karaoke bar. And they made me sing That's What Friends Are For, which was a big hit in the 80s, I think, or the 90s. And I was so unenthusiastic about the whole thing that I got up as this little 11-year-old and I did like an Ian Curtis impression or if that's what friends are for, even though I didn't know who Joy Division were. I just sort of got in front of the microphone in front of this big crowd, and I just sort of went, "That's what friends are for. The good times, the bad." You know what? There's actually a tape of that somewhere, but I need to buy a video 8 player, and then I need to get the tape and repair the tape. And if I do that, I'm pretty sure there is footage of me singing that. I have to try and unearth this footage. Anyway, back on track. It says here for assertiveness, I'm low, 18th percentile. That makes sense to me. I'm very unassertive, and it has sometimes driven people nuts. But I'm also more assertive than some people, and I would say that I'm becoming more and more assertive just to make my life easier and life easier for those around me. I'm becoming a bit more assertive, but in a very polite, understated way. All right, now we get to something that really resonates with me. Neuroticism, moderately high. Now we're talking. I'm 61st percentile when it comes to neuroticism. I don't think I need to even explain that. I think people can tell that I'm pretty neurotic. For withdrawal, it says that I'm moderately high, 72nd percentile. So this is an aspect of neuroticism. And it says here that people who are high in withdrawal have anticipatory anxiety. So basically it's more challenging to approach new and uncertain situations. And I think sometimes when I tell people about the travels that I've done, it makes me sound like I don't have that high level of that kind of anxiety, but I kind of do. I remember the second time I went to Belarus, it was really freaky because when I went to the counter, I was in Estonia actually, and I was at the Belarusian airline counter, and there's this girl there, and I give her my passport and I check in my baggage, and when she looks me up on the system, she looks at me in shock and then smirks as she looks at whatever was written on the system. Whatever the Belarusian government had on me was written on her computer screen. I don't know what she was looking at. Anyway, she didn't say anything. She gave me my ticket, and I went and sat down in the waiting room to go to Minsk from Tallinn. And obviously I'm going to Belarus, so there's not exactly many people hopping on this plane. There's one Japanese guy by himself, and then there's me. And I'd chosen as a book to take to Belarus as my relaxing read was the second of the trilogy of Stalin biographies written by Stephen Kotkin. So I'm reading all about Stalin doing these purges in the 1930s, and I'm like nervous because I've got this smirk from the girl behind the counter for the Belarusian Airlines, and I know that I'm going back to Belarus for the second time, and I actually started feeling proper anxiety, like my heart started racing, and I had so much anticipatory anxiety about returning to Belarus for the second time, thinking I'm going to get arrested when I get to Minsk, that I actually shut my Stalin book and decided not to read it for the rest of the trip. And I went over to a vending machine and I bought a can of Coke and I drank it while staring ahead blankly. And then I spent the Belarus trip for the 2 weeks that I was floating around the country reading the Morrissey autobiography, which, I don't know, was much more soothing for me to read for some reason. And then also under neuroticism is volatility, where I'm 48. So that's kind of average, isn't it? It says that I have like fluctuations in mood, which makes sense. I would say, yeah, I'm not seen as the most moody person, but people close to me might think that. But I would say, yeah, I'm pretty average when it comes to that. So I feel good about that. I can definitely keep my emotions in check. That's one thing I've learned to do for my own survival. So next we've got openness, where it says that I'm moderately high at 61. That makes sense to me. I wasn't sure whether I would be a bit higher than that, but I wouldn't think that I would be lower than that either. I guess there's some aspects in my life where I can seem a little bit not super open. I mean, it's not like I've got green hair or piercings or tattoos, but maybe that's nothing to do with openness anyway. But then when you scroll down in the openness category, you've actually got intellect, and for me it's low. It's 14th percentile, which is extremely low intellect, and I'm sure a lot of people would not argue that I have extremely low intellect, but you might think someone like myself who's, got a bachelor in philosophy would have a bit higher intellect. Now apparently it's nothing to do with IQ, but it actually says that people low in intellect are less likely to be engaged with ideas and abstract concepts. They're less interested in learning philosophical concepts and see little use in them. People like me apparently avoid complex and abstract information, which is kind of odd given I'm an INFP, and once again I have this YouTube channel and I'm interested in philosophy. But then again, it kind of does make sense to me that I'm not really that high even in philosophical intellect. I've got this side of me which hates the idea of getting lost in the source of ideas and abstract notions. So there's something I hate about it. And I do sometimes feel like I've got this desire to really avoid overly complex abstract philosophy because, I don't know, I think it's actually somewhat related to the creative arty side of myself, which just much more prefers relying on kind of like an inner magic rather than over analyzing things. But it could also just be that I'm not programmed that way and I don't have the intellect to understand these great philosophical dilemmas. And you gotta remember, I didn't do very well in my philosophy degree. I passed. But on the other hand, when it comes to aesthetics, I'm very high at 93. Which is kind of interesting. What it's actually saying is that my openness is not coming from my connection to abstract philosophical ideas, but it's more about like beauty and color and collecting things and being imaginative and daydreaming, which is very me. And I guess it says something that the stuff that gives me joy is playing music and drawing and using colors and trying to express my inner world through beauty. But then again, if you look at this through the sort of Myers-Briggs lens, they're going to go and say INFPs are philosophical but not really interested in aesthetics as much, because that's the ISFP thing, right? But this applies to loads of INFPs who aren't interested in being overly philosophical but prefer to express their inner worlds, abstract as they may be. They prefer to express them through music and poetry and writing and dancing, and loads of INFPs just like doing little crafts, and they're very meticulous in making these beautiful, whatever it is, crocheting or whatever it is. So it sort of doesn't line up, does it, with the Myers-Briggs system, but I might be wrong there, I don't know. But like, I think like this actually surprises me to say that I'm this high. And I think that might be one of the great benefits of doing the Big Five, is seeing how high that score is. I don't know, maybe that's a much bigger aspect to myself than I previously thought, when I like to identify as someone who's more philosophical and more interested in abstract philosophical concepts, when I don't think that's actually me at all. But I might have kind of got a little bit attached to that idea because I did a philosophy degree and because I identified as an INFP, you know what I mean? But anyway, those are my Big Five results. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you done the Big Five test, and do you find it's kind of different to what you might expect given your MBTI results? Are you surprised by any of my results? And do you think that they're very separate personality tests, or if there's any crossover? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.